Welcome to KonTerra Interviews, where we focus on topics that help individuals and leaders support and maintain well-being in high-stress environments and work roles. Today, we're discussing coping in insecure environments. What sort of reactions we can experience when we're living in a situation that feels threatening and insecure, and what can help us cope better in those situations. I'm Lisa McKay. I'm a psychologist who specialises in stress, trauma, and resilience. I have particular experience working with humanitarian, development, and emergency response workers. I've spent most of my life abroad, including in Zimbabwe, Laos, and Vanuatu. I'm currently living in Australia and serving as the Senior Training Advisor for the KonTerra Group. Since 2007, the KonTerra Group has helped humanitarian, development, government, and corporate organisations navigate high-stress and high-threat work environments around the world. We specialise in high-quality staff care, leadership support, organisational development, and evaluation services that enhance well-being and performance. My guest on today's interview is Marie-Adele Salem. Marie-Adele, would you share a bit about yourself with us?
Sure. Good morning, Lisa, or good afternoon, maybe for you. So my name is Marie-Adele Salem. I'm a Lebanese psychotherapist. I'm currently based in France. I work in the humanitarian sector since 2006. I worked in countries affected by wars, natural disasters, or in countries as well developing some kind of mental health services. And I'm also a family therapist. So I usually either support communities that are affected or train staff working in a country. And since 2015, I also support staff around the world through the KonTerra services. Thank you.
Marie-Adele, I'm so glad that you could join us today. And I know you have not only a lot of experience supporting others, but you have your own personal lived experience of living and coping with insecure environments. And I'm really grateful that we get to hear about some of that today. So we're speaking today during what is a challenging time globally, and particularly challenging in Ukraine. So many people in Ukraine and surrounding countries are living in what we would call an insecure environment. Marie-Adele, can you tell us a little bit more about what happens in our bodies and our minds when we're living in an insecure environment?
Yeah, sure. So I think that when the environment becomes insecure, there is a sense of loss of control and of loss of sense of protection and of loss of a clear plan of what to do and how to help ourselves and others. It's very important to understand that most of the reactions we have are basically physiological. If we're having reactions that we cannot recognize, it doesn't mean that we're weak or that we cannot handle stress or fear. It's simply a physiological reaction that we will explain today that will help us survive or protect ourselves or protect people that we love. How does it work? So basically, if we're walking on the street together and then we hear a sound, a very weird sound, a sound that I know very well if I'm used to sounds of armed conflicts, or a sound that sounds scary, but I don't know what it is. So when my brain receives a message that there is some kind of danger around me, instantly something called in my body, the limbic system, will be triggered. So the limbic system is a group of glands and hormonal and neurological connections that are in my body that have many functions, but mainly the function of survival. It's instinctual reactions. It's not something I can control. So when the brain receives danger, limbic system gets activated, and with it, different kind of physiological reactions that we all know. We all felt fear one time in our life. So we have hyperventilation, we breathe very fast, we have increase in heartbeat, we can have a strong muscular force that we don't have usually. So we can lift something that is very heavy. So different physiological reactions that are there, as I said, to help us either run away or protect ourselves and our loved ones. Once the source of danger is away, our limbic system goes back to normal, and then we can breathe normally and function properly. However, in times of conflict and armed conflicts and insecurities and danger, the brain knows that even if there is no sound or I cannot see anything that is scary, this can happen anytime.
Yeah.
So the limbic system stays alert in order to know when we should run away or protect ourselves and our loved ones. This is why the reactions that we have only in times of extreme danger will stay there. And this is why people cannot sleep, cannot breathe properly, will lose appetite, lose the ability to focus. So on different levels, whether cognitive, emotional, behavioral, relational, we have reactions that are there all the time and that we feel that we cannot control. And this is the most disturbing part, as if I'm not myself anymore.
Yeah, it makes total sense, doesn't it? I mean, why it's difficult to relax when your brain is ringing that alarm bell, and that alarm bell is designed to keep us safe and help us protect people we love. And so this is a normal, natural reaction. But what happens over time, if that alarm bell keeps getting rung, is that we have these side effects, these stress reactions that show up in our lives that get in the way of relaxing and sleeping and relationships and all the other things that you spoke about.
Exactly. Something else I think that I find very common with people I work with is whenever they try to wind down, whenever they try to relax, it's not possible because every time they're not completely focused on the current task they're doing, their brain goes like swinging between what happened, what will happen. What happened? It was scary. What will happen? Can I protect myself? So every time we feel that we're not here, you know, we went somewhere else, or every time we feel that we can't breathe or that we just want to get out of a room, if I ask you what were you thinking in that exact moment, you will notice that your brain was swinging non-stop in the same second. This also activates all the physiological reactions that we talked about, because we have this feeling of loss of control
and unpredictability. So that sense of not knowing what might happen next, it's really bad for us as humans. We're not very good at living in that sort of sense of uncertainty and unpredictability. So when everything feels uncertain and unthreatening, why is it even more important than normal to really think about how we can help ourselves cope?
I always tell people, as you said, from my own experience living in times of war, but also working when I grew up, when everything seems uncontrollable, it's true that I cannot, like me as a person, I cannot stop the war. I cannot stop the sources of danger to affect me or my family. I cannot manage what's happening outside my body, but I can manage what's happening inside my body. And I have to manage it because my health and my physical and mental health are important for me to survive. So I have this theory, it's out of observation, it's not really scientific, but I think that war destructs bridges. So bridges to ourselves, bridges to others, and bridges between past, present, and future. Wars are designed in a very smart way. You know, it doesn't only, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking psychosocial, you know, it doesn't destruct only buildings and infrastructures, it destructs our bridges. So this is why if I can't fight during a war, I can at least protect my bridges and make sure they are there for when the war is finished, you know, they are there, they are protected wherever I end up living. So my relation to myself and my relation to others are things I can manage through self-care, what we call self-care tips. And it's important to protect them because these bridges protect my health, my physical and mental health. We can discuss, of course, some tips today on how to do it. I just want to add one sentence. Wars are not normal. Our reactions to it are normal. It's not, whatever reaction I'm having is normal, because as you said, we're not born to live this level of stress, you know, especially coming from interactions with other humans. Unfortunately, we're in 2022 and we're still talking about this topic, unfortunately.
I know, it is very unfortunate. And I think it's a really good point to underline is that these reactions that we have when we're placed in environments that feel uncertain and feel threatening, they are normal reactions to a situation that was never meant to be normal. You know, we were never designed as a people to live in a state of high constant stress and vigilance, wondering what will happen next and where the next threat is coming from. And so it's no wonder that it's a challenge.
Mm.
It's a challenge that many people around the world deal with extraordinarily well under extraordinary pressure. But what are some of the things that we can do to help ourselves cope when we're living in an insecure environment?
Mm-hmm. I think the first very important point that we discussed so far is knowing that it's physiological, is knowing that is normal, and avoiding judging ourselves and others, even when the reaction is not very well accepted. Because as I said, there are behavioral changes, there are emotional changes, there are relational changes, but sometimes also there are changes that are difficult to accept, like, for example, spiritual changes or existential changes. It's very important to know that each one copes differently. And if the person is coping now with this reaction that is not hurting himself or others, it's okay, because as he or she changed to reach this stage, they will change again, once the situation is different. So the first recommendation that we insist on is, please accept and do not judge whatever is your reaction or the other reactions.
Looking at your reactions and looking at other reactions with that sense of compassion. And I think that self-compassion on our own reactions can be really hard. I think we tend to judge ourselves harshly for how we're coping or how we perceive we're not coping. But I think that's such an important point that you raise, is to give yourself grace and to recognize that pressure you're under is unusual, and that some self-compassion and compassion, as much as we can reach for patience and compassion with others, goes a long way. I think that's a great place to start.
Exactly. And this is the base to protect the bridges I was talking about, the base really to start protecting and reinforcing these intrapersonal bridges and interpersonal bridges. The second one is basically, as much as possible, to protect our limbic system from overstimulation. And this is basically through avoiding as much as possible the news. So I know from personal experience that when something bad happens, we have the news all the time running, either in the house, through the radio, the TV, on the laptop. Now we have WhatsApp, Facebook, everywhere, you have news coming. And this is not good for our brain, because it keeps telling the brain danger, 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 and stimulating the reactions that we talked about. So please remember that the news are there on the internet. It's not going anywhere. It's waiting for us. And it's our role to know how to manage it, how to control it again, like to decide, I need 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes for my lunch break, and 10 minutes maximum 2 hours before bedtime. Never sleep while reading try to sleep, because then you cannot sleep while reading the news, because this affects the stimulation of the limbic system.
Yes.
Some families in Ukraine now have an application. So they share an application on their phone that tells them when they need to take action, so to hide or to go from one place to another, even if they are in a safe place. So I would recommend to try and see what kind of applications or plans you can have with your colleagues or with your family to avoid being on the news all the time. This is the first recommendation regarding the triggers, with the limbic system. Some other things that help the limbic system as well is having a clear plan. So what will I do if something happens? Who will I inform, to agree, whether with colleagues at the office or with family members, on the steps that will be taken whenever something happens. When we have a plan, our brain knows that we are kind of in control. Also, it's very helpful. I don't know if you want to add something to the limbic system part.
We could talk, you and I could talk about this all day, I know, with any of these questions we could. I think it's such an important point, like limiting exposure to things that are going to ring that alarm bell in your brain. Exactly. And also just recognizing that one of the best things that you can do to help yourself cope over time is to periodically pay attention in the moment to bringing those limbic system reactions down. Exactly. And recognizing that it's not actually going to help you. In fact, it will hurt you a lot in the long run if you are staying in that keyed up, hyper alert state over long periods of time. So deliberately paying attention to limiting those triggers, and then going beyond that and going, what do I need right now to help myself feel safe and in control. And what do I need to do to tell my body in this moment here now? We may not know what tomorrow will bring, but in this moment here and now, I am safe and I am relatively in control. I think that's, yeah, you bring such an important point.
This is, I think, the most difficult part, even for us as mental health professionals, because I know from experience that I should not tell people to relax completely because, you know, they have to be alert. But then what is the right balance between a healthy alert, whatever that means, and then, you know, being extremely alert all the time and, you know, stressed, and this will not lead to anything positive.
Yeah.
So this is why we talk about grounding. When you say coming back to the here and now, it's very important for the brain to relax from time to time, and especially when we know we're safe, when we reach somewhere safe, or when we know that for these few coming hours, nothing will happen that is very dangerous, that I should protect myself from. So grounding is something we're inviting everyone to read about and to practice, because it doesn't take much time. It's based on 5 senses or cognition. I will give some examples. And it's not very contradictory with the situation outside. So sometimes people who do yoga cannot do yoga anymore because they feel like they cannot just be grateful and, you know, breathe while they're hearing the bombs outside. It's very disturbing, you know, to try to find this balance. So grounding is there since the beginning, I think, of civilization. I will give an example. Our ancestors were very smart. They found that this helps, you know, and this is why I think it's something to be considered that can help us physically and psychologically. So in all the countries I worked with, you know, in all the civilization or cultures that I discovered, whenever someone is not feeling well, so in funerals, after an incident, there is always a person who would come with a cup of water and say, drink. You know, it's I don't know how they knew, you know, I'm talking about our ancestors. So basically I have a cup of water here. So basically when we hold the cup of water or the bowl or whatever is offered to us by force, if we're not feeling well, you know, our brain will focus here because without us wanting it, because if it's too hot, it will just, you know, let it go. And then when we are forced to drink, our senses are activated. If the water is poisonous or something I should not drink, I will not drink it. I will have the reaction of letting it out of my body directly, you know. And when I drink, if my limbic system doesn't wind down, the water doesn't go down my throat, I will choke. But since the limbic system is there to calm, to protect me, it will wind down automatically for the water to go down my throat. So this takes literally 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but it's the oldest grounding technique. It's really, it's activating the 5 senses to stop the swinging that we talked about earlier, you know, between painful past, worries, future, and it helps me come back to the here and now.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of grounding rituals that we do throughout the day that we're not fully aware of. So some people feel better when they pray. Some people feel better when they cook. Some people feel better when they play music. Whatever people used to do before the crisis and they stop doing now, or they're doing it less, please do it again, because everything related to your 5 senses, planting, sculpting, painting, are very helpful to wind down, to help the limbic system wind down. Even when you're eating or drinking your coffee, close your eyes, focus on, you know, the textures, the taste, the temperature. This also helps. It takes literally 5 seconds and it helps our brain tangibly.
Absolutely. And our brains also are constantly reading information from our environment, but also within our own body. And so, you know, many of you will have heard about taking a deep breath. I mean, we were all, when we were children, you know, and we'd have a parent or a teacher say, take a deep breath. But when we take deep, slow breaths, that's the breathing pattern that we use when we're relaxed and we're safe and we're in control. And so when we're running and in fight flight, we're breathing more quickly, more shallowly. So if we deliberately slow and deepen our breathing, and we do that for even just a minute or two, we're sending signals straight up our body to our brain from our own body saying, hey, things are okay, I'm safe and in control, and you can relax. So we can even cue our own physiology with what we're doing to come down a couple of steps of activation.
Exactly, exactly. I want to add here the importance, the recommendation that you mentioned now. I think it's very important to be aware of this breathing. A lot of people that we're supporting now are mentioning that them or their family member, I'm talking about Ukraine specifically, are having what we call panic attacks. So like heavy breathing or feeling that we're suffocating, or so whatever is described as an anxiety or panic attack, even if we'll not go into diagnosis, but people feeling that they're suffocating. This is what they're explaining. And I think that it's important to understand that it's also the reaction of the limbic system who's not able to wind down, to go back to normal. And what you mentioned now, if we just breathe with the person, just put your hand, if the person is okay with it, with the person's hand on the chest, and just breathe together, this deep breath that you talked about, Lisa, it helps the panic attack wind down, Yeah. Another recommendation that we're sharing today as well with Ukrainian colleagues or families is, when this shortness of breath will happen. Few seconds before that, you have an alarm, you have a warning sign in your body. Sometimes it's heartbeat, sometimes it's hand sweating, sometimes it's just pain in the head. This is what people are describing. So whatever happens in your body, just few seconds before, don't stay in your place. Just move somewhere else and do this breathing that you described, Lisa, also some grounding, and you will see that this helps with preventing the panic attack.
Yeah, so good. Can you tell us a little bit more about you've talked a couple of times already about the swinging in our minds. Why might we be experiencing more intense emotional reactions and mood swings as well, like swinging in our thoughts, but also swinging rapidly between different feelings? Why might that be happening? And what's one or two things that can help us with that?
I think, as we said, all our physiological reactions, are new to us. When it's the first time that we live through uncertainty or this level of danger, it's very difficult to understand what's happening in our body. And because the limbic system is activated, like we mentioned, it's also the base of emotions. The limbic system has this function of our emotion and managing our emotional reactions. So whatever we feel seems to be amplified. So if you're sad, you're like very sad. If you're happy, you're very happy. Right? Everything is amplified and out of control. It's also because of all these reactions that we're describing today. And mood can change, and it's normal, because I understand from people that they're trying their best to be positive, to be there, to try and do something, but then with a very small trigger, or sometimes even without a trigger, they will switch to another state of mood. This swinging is also helped by what we call grounding physically through the five senses, or cognitively by thinking about it and being aware of what is happening. Yeah. Another thing that really helps is also try as much as possible to be connected, to explain what's happening to colleagues or to family members, and not to be isolated with all these swinging that are happening. Yeah. I don't know if you would add anything as well.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about one of the most common reactions we see in these situations, and heightened irritability and anger. And I was thinking about something that I talk about with my kids often, how anger is sort of the tip of the iceberg, and underneath anger and irritability, the rest of the iceberg below the surface is full of all these other feelings. And anger can be sort of like a red herring. Anger is usually being fueled by other emotions. And I think this ties back to what you mentioned at the beginning about giving ourselves grace and self-compassion, and recognizing that often when we're feeling irritable and angry, like A, that's normal, and B, that anger, that energy is being fueled by a whole lot of other emotions, including a lot of quite rational fear that's giving it that energy and causing it to spill over.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm thinking that it's also this need to blame something or someone, you know, with everything that is happening. We're humans, so
Yeah.
we need to blame. And usually, unfortunately, we let go of this blame and anger in the safest places. So with colleagues that we trust or with family members again.
Partners, yeah. Yeah, because that's when we tend to let go of the control.
Yes.
It is a shame often, isn't it? And then this is not just restricted to coping with uncertain environments, but you definitely see it here because everything is magnified, that we can feel like those we love the most can get the worst of us sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they're that safe space and we feel held and connected and temporarily safe. Can you talk about a bit, why is moving our bodies so helpful when it comes to managing stress, and why should we be looking for ways to build some exercise or movement into our routines if we can at all possible?
As we said, a lot of things are out of control and we need to manage what we can control. So basically, exercising is something that we can do to help our mental health and physical health. A lot of people prefer not very active sports. So for example, some stretching or some mindfulness, you know, with the body reactions and some breathing, as you mentioned, while some people prefer to get this adrenaline and cortisol triggered already by the brain to get activated, you know, and so they believe that as if this energy will get out of, like negative energy will get out of their body and they will recharge with breathing a new air, you know, they will recharge better energy. So it really depends on what kind of physical activity you prefer, but it's very important to keep the small routine. So we already talked about the importance of having routine controlling the news, having daily routines of grounding, adding as well some routine or rituals of physical activity throughout the day is also very helpful, just to keep our muscles, you know, because the less you sleep as well, you know, the articulations and the muscles will become more sore. So this is why as well some physical activity can be very helpful throughout the day.
Absolutely. We're giving our body, you know, all those stress chemicals that get dumped into our bloodstream when we're under threat. They are preparing us to do something. They're preparing us to fight or to run away. So when we move our bodies, we're giving our bodies what it expects, and we're helping use up some of those stress chemicals and do that sort of reset internally that can help our bodies and our brains.
Exactly.
So it can feel really wrong when you're in an uncertain, high threat environment to think about self-care, to think about distraction, to think about pleasure or joy or reading a book or listening to music or doing something, you know, normal or fun. Like it just feels wrong to think about that, I think sometimes. But why can this actually be a good thing for us to do sometimes if we can?
Sense of routine and normality is important for our brain, and even if very bad things are happening around us, we have the right to feel alive. We have this need to feel alive. So we might feel bad, as you mentioned, Lisa, if we're having fun and laughing, knowing that few kilometers away people are not very happy, you know. So I tend to invite people to find a balance between helping others, feeling this compassion and empathy that we talked about, that is very important. We need to protect it. It needs to survive in times of uncertainty and armed conflict. So keeping this and acting upon it. So really helping tangibly, you know, by, I don't know, collecting clothes, food, being there for others, and making sure that we have the same amount of empathy and compassion with ourselves as well. So if someone 50 kilometers away will need my help as a humanitarian actor, I will make sure I will do it. But then when my body or my heart or my mind needs help, I'll just like keep it aside, you know. It's very important to have this balance between what I'm offering, what I'm helping with, and what am I doing for myself. And going back to these rituals that are part of a normal life help us, you know, to reestablish a sense of normality and routine. I want to say that this guilt that comes from enjoying simple moments in life can be perceived as a negative thing and can can make us feel sad or can make us isolate ourselves. Please remember that the guilt is the peak of empathy. And I always tell people, don't be afraid. Don't try to get rid of this guilt. It's there because you feel with other humans. This means that the human bridges are intact, and it is great, But instead of just stopping your life, act upon it. Do something to help others, and also keep the rituals that will help you. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did. And then some. I'd like to move now to talking about when you have children in these situations. So when, we just were talking about those human bridges, and many people are not going through this in isolation. We are a member of a family. We are somebody's son or daughter. We're someone's partner. We're somebody's parent. It can be particularly challenging for parents in these situations with that double layer of fear for themselves and for their children. So talk to us a little bit about when you have children with you in these uncertain environments. Let's start with, what are some of the stress and anxiety reactions that you might expect to see from children in these sorts of situations?
I think that children's limbic system as well has a big role, in trying to process what's happening. So they are scared as well. They can see on the faces and in the voice tone of their parents that there is a reason to be very scared, and they don't know. It's a new feeling that they don't know how to express or manage because they didn't learn yet, or because it's something new. So children tend to express more behaviorally than adults, even if adults do as well in times of uncertainty. But we will notice that children are more hyperactive, or more will throw more easily tantrums, or will cry a lot, or will become more stubborn. They might also have bedwetting, at night. So all sometimes loss of appetite or eating more. So all the behavioral and physical reactions and the emotional ones that are there for adults are there for children, but it's very difficult to manage it because sometimes they don't even have the capacity yet to express themselves or to ask for help. I always tell parents that whatever symptom your child is showing, you should be grateful, because this is how you know that this child needs help. So don't panic. The symptom is not the problem, is what's underneath the symptoms that the child is trying to understand, or get clarification on, or get comfort on, etc. So the first reactions that parents have can also be affecting negatively these reactions. So the reactions of children. So parents that I work with either have the extreme position of nothing is happening, it's just fireworks and we're playing, even if we change houses, everything is there. It's like they want really to protect their child from any source of danger, even the information, And other parents are in the other extreme, where they are very hyperprotective, like hiding their children, making them aware that it's very dangerous, So these are two extremes that parents have because they don't know how to deal with this situation. We recommend as much as possible to stay in the middle. So it is a dangerous situation, and we explain to children and that we are here to take the right measures to protect them. If they have any question, we can answer with the words that we have. If we don't know, we tell them. We don't know, we'll come back to you. We ask someone, another parent, we consult, and then we get back to them with answers. So as much as possible, be honest, and as much as possible, balance what you share. Don't make them too scared, or don't deny that something is happening. I would like to share the example of one Palestinian mother. I asked for her permission because I found it amazing what she did, just instinctively. So she had three kids, 3 daughters between the age of 2 and 6, with her in the shelter during the war. And so one of the kids asked if she should sleep next to her, because everyone is scared and they are in a shelter, the war is going on. So the mother told her daughters, if you are scared and you feel like you want to sleep next to me, you are welcome. If you feel okay, we are all together in this shelter, you can sleep in your bed. So she gave them, you know, the choice. She's like, she validated being scared and being not scared at the same time. And I find this, you know, amazing, to give choices to children, to explain to them that we are here, whatever is their choice, and as much as possible to validate this feelings that they have, you know.
I think it's such a, again, such a rich topic we could talk about for hours. I think I also want to bring into the conversation the importance of, again, coming back to your own grounding and regulation, because children see everything. Like, they read so much from us beyond what we say. And you mentioned how they pick up from the look on your face and the tone of your voice. And again, I don't say this to layer on the guilt, because many of us are experts at, you know, feeling some form of guilt when it comes to our parenting. That's not to bring guilt, that's just to sort of state the reality that your children will pick up and mirror our vibes. And so it becomes important for us to ground and calm ourselves to the extent that we can, not just for ourselves, but because that is one thing we can do to calm them. That they will read, when we can give them these calm choices, when we can be periodically a calm presence and as relaxed as possible in the situation with them, whether we're in a shelter or where, that will help ground them as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think parents are scared as well, you know, as you said, if they're doing a good job, if their children will survive this, if it will affect their mental health. So it's very difficult to know what to do in such, you know, situations. I always also share with parents that they will be okay, you know, when we provide, when as much as possible, we can provide this space where they can express themselves, they can receive answers, and we're together in this as a family, children will be okay. So I was, as a person, I grew up in a shelter during the war in Lebanon. I can still remember the moments that comforted me and the moments that were very, very stressful. And children just need this information, you know, even if it's scary information, but at least it's the truth, and we're like aligned, you know, with the parents and everything happening around us. So it's very important to know that this develops, unfortunately, I'm saying this way, but it develops the resilience of children and their capacity to cope in different situations when we're there together, supporting them. Yeah. I also want to add, Lisa, I don't know if I have time, I'm sorry, on this topic, that storytelling helped children a lot. So after the explosion in Beirut 2 years ago, a lot of parents didn't know how to explain to their children what happened, why they lost their houses, why the school was destroyed, why they lost family members and friends, you know. So someone wrote a short story about that day and what happened, and focused on how people helped each other that day and after it, you know, how people cleaned the city, how people were there for the wounded. So it kind of transformed this horrible event that happened back then into the human side of people being there for each other, you know. It was very helpful for children and for parents to know how to explain, you know. So if there is something in the culture, in the area, you know, for Ukraine and the surrounding countries, or if you can look at the internet on a story that can be age appropriate and that can transform a difficult event into something supportive, it can also be helpful.
Oh, that is so important. We are wired for story, human beings. I mean, you watch how we respond to story at all levels and all ages, and we are meaning makers. Stories can give shape to that need to have some sort of meaning. And, you know, it can't give all the answers, but like you said, it can provide a really helpful tool it builds a bridge, like a bridge of understanding from something that seems incomprehensible. You start to build these tiny bridges out in directions that build that understanding and build that sense of hope and build that sense of possibility in the future.
Exactly. Can I add something about family, or
go ahead? Yeah, go ahead. We've got time. We've got 15 more minutes.
Perfect. I remember you mentioned in one webinar, Lisa, and it was during the COVID, and it was so helpful for me, with my family as well, the importance of calling grandparents and checking on them, and like asking them to tell something nice about their own childhood or their own coping mechanism. It was really nice because it created this bridge between my son. We were stuck at home like everyone, and my mom or his other grandparents, who are also alone in their homes. So in Ukraine today and surrounding countries, people are facing this challenge. Old people are refusing to leave home. They want to stay even if in the red zones. They're refusing to leave, and we have stuff scared because they're trying to convince their parents to leave this area, but the parents are refusing, and it's creating struggles and guilt and anger, and so it's very important to understand that elderly and people who are like older than the stuff we're supporting, their parents basically, or their grandparents, can't just leave their roots. It's their only way of fighting and of controlling what is happening. And I know from a lot of parents or elderly that I supported in other countries that even if they're under danger, they feel more in control and safe, and they can kind of protect their mental health because it's as if they did something. So if you're facing this situation, for the people hearing us today, please remember to tell them that you're proud of them, even if you don't agree with if you did everything and they're not convinced this is their decision, right? So please tell them that you're proud of how they're trying to resist, and also try to build this bridge if you have kids, of asking them how they are, what's helping them, and maybe what had them in the past, if they survived unrest or a political security before, because some of them did, what had them, what they were used to do as children to be there for each other or for their family. Try to build this bridge of past, present, future that we also mentioned today.
Family stories are so powerful. When I was doing that with my kids, we were living in Vanuatu, and my grandparents were in Australia. So it was my children's great grandparents, and we were calling them, and they were 95, and the stories were remarkable, right? And it was wonderful for me to hear them, but it was wonderful for my kids as well to build that sense of history and to see. And it was wonderful for them to be able to share from their childhood. Mind you, my grandfather told my son a story about how he used to go and hunt bees, and he told him my son, a born adventurer, was like, right, I'm going to go and get that bush knife, and I'm going to go and find a beehive, and like, I'm out of here. So, there are side effects, but it is a beautiful thing. And a way to reach, if there are telecommunications, sometimes a way to reach people that you can't reach physically.
Exactly.
And to connect sometimes when the present feels really hard to discuss, the past is easier. Yeah. And if you can get people to tell stories from their past, it can be helpful from multiple angles.
It is. It reminds us of who we are, and it brings the sense of dignity in a way, because losing everything and being called a refugee or people who flee home or whatever we try to call people who are losing their homes in a nice way is very humiliating. It's not a nice feeling, whatever our age is, So just remembering who we are and remembering these roots is very important in such time.
I think so. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time together, but before we end, I wanted to touch briefly on colleagues and team members, and we will hopefully get to have another discussion about supporting managers and leaders and colleagues and teams. But if you are trying to not just live in an insecure environment, but also you have work responsibilities or community responsibilities, that you have those multiple levels of responsibilities, do you have any tips on ways that we can support team members and colleagues in these sorts of insecure environments?
I think everything that we discussed today, specifically on tips of self-help, should be. I avoid using the word should, but in work environment should be implemented daily as well between colleagues. So if you have like the morning check-in, you know, in times of emergency, usually humanitarian workers have more coordination meetings than usual. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's 2 times a day. So whenever you have these coordination meetings, please try to check in on everyone and take 1 minute just to do a grounding technique, or to do a breathing technique, or to do anything that can help the team. You can decide together, you know, take 1 minute and explain what we explained today. It's not just because we feel like breathing, it's because it helps us physiologically. It will help our brain to focus during this meeting. Also, please make sure that everyone is aware of the kind of support you have in your organization. So whether it's group, individual support, remote individual sessions with KonTerra, if you feel that the team needs group support, know that like we as KonTerra are providing this, or maybe you can provide it if you have a mental health professional in your team. Always make sure that people are aware and that you can access these services when needed. The last recommendation that I would share is to always remember the purpose and the values of what you're doing, especially in these times, because sometimes you might feel overwhelmed. You might feel that it's a lot and whatever you're doing is not changing anything. So people might feel helpless or might wonder why they are doing this. It will not lead to any change. So please remember that in times of war, the sense of humanity is a victim, can be affected, you know, can be wounded. So as long as you can protect this sense of humanity and be there in your community with your own values, you feel better, and the sense of humanity in your community will survive, basically. One last, not recommendation, but awareness raising that I would like to add regarding humanitarian specifically is to keep in mind that the community you're supporting has this fluctuation, like the swinging of emotions that we talked about. So a lot of people might be angry at you. A lot of people might feel that you're not hearing them, you're not taking into consideration their own priorities. Please remember what we said. People let go of their anger in the safest place. So the more they are safe with you, the more they trust you, the more they will express this blame. They cannot blame whoever is doing this, you know, they can't, it's not feasible, sometimes it's risky, but they can just let go of these feelings in the space that you're providing. So if you feel that it's a lot, please remember that they're not talking to you, they're just expressing what's happening around them.
Yeah. Marie-Adele, thank you so much for joining me today for this KonTerra interview and for sharing your insight as a counsellor and mental health professional, but also your insight as someone who has lived in these sorts of environments, both as a child and as an adult. And thank you to everyone who's joined us and has listened. We hope that you gleaned some useful tips and some takeaways. And we plan to return soon with another KonTerra interview focusing on tips for managers and leaders on supporting staff in isolated and hazardous situations.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I wish everyone a lot of energy and a good immunity, physical and mental, to go on with these difficult times.
I second that. All right. Thank you and goodbye.